Hi guys, it's
Hi.
Tess and Madison with the Conscious Cowboys, and I've been learning. I don't know if this has been a thing for you, Mad, but like I feel like the past couple weeks it's been a big learning curve of not taking things personally.
Yeah.
And you would think by age, almost 30 that you would have a good awareness of that and you would know that
Yeah.
things happen and it doesn't always have a reflection on you or it doesn't involve you. It's just that person's doing their thing and you don't have to get your panties in a wad about it.
Right.
But here I was taking things personally. Other people were taking things personally in my life, separate scenarios. And I was like, what is going on? We need to talk about this. We need to get to the bottom of it for
Yeah.
us and for everybody.
I mean, I feel like you've read the Four Agreements, right?
Yeah, but it's been a long time.
Okay, so Don Miguel Ruiz, I believe that's how you pronounce his name, wrote the Four Agreements. I'm pretty sure it was him, right?
Yeah, I think.
And one of the pillars is like, don't take things personally. And I've read that book probably one time every single year. And like, even though I've read that and like the knowledge is within me, it still is something that all of us deal with, Like, it could be like the smallest thing and something happens and I'm like, oh my God, why the fuck did that upset me so hard? And I'm like, oh, it's because I took it personally. And so it's like, yes, that can be the initial reaction. And then having to like rewire your brain and bring awareness to it can help you let it go. So I think that this conversation is necessary.
Over and over and over
Yeah.
again.
Yeah. Just like we were talking about last week, how like soul work or spiritual work, however you want to call it, it doesn't just like happen and sticks forever. Like you need to continue to work on it day in and day out.
Yeah, because I'll find myself like if I'm reacting to something because I'm taking it personally, I'll be like, I know better. Like this behavior that I'm doing doesn't align with how I think and feel or would tell someone else to respond to it. Like logically speaking, I know how to handle this situation. But emotionally speaking, sometimes I get too wrapped up in it and then I catch myself. I'm like, oh my God. It didn't need to go like this.
Yeah. And I think we were talking about this yesterday, or maybe I was like telling my cousin this, is that like you can be like, I was telling you this too, is that you can be like this person and you understand like who you are and how you act. And then you do something and you're just like, who the fuck is that?
Yeah,
like,
I don't
who
know
was
her.
that person? Like, I literally was journaling this morning about that. And I was saying like, I was like giving myself compassion, which I think is like a big theme of what we're going to talk about today. But for like yesterday, for example, like when I was going to yoga, and like I'm usually like so friendly to the front desk people, but yesterday I was just like more cold, and maybe it wasn't even noticeable because there was like a lot of like exchange happening with other people, and I just kind of waved and like went right into the yoga studio. And normally I'd be like, how was your weekend? Like, how are you? But I just like did not have the capacity to do that. So I just like said hi and like I just waved, and then I went and sat on my yoga mat, and I was like, who the fuck was that? Like I don't know. I do know that Madison actually very intimately. Like I know her. And like I was just journaling, like I'm just sending her love because like sometimes that just is me and that's okay.
Like there's been two examples that I can bring up that I'm not going to go too in depth about because it does involve other people, but like to glaze over it, the one that I took personally, I understand, like I looked at the situation and I went, okay, I know why I had such strong feelings about it. I don't know why I took it personally because I know better, but in the moment I felt really strong feelings about something and I was just like overwhelmed and I was taking it personal. So then everything happened from there. And looking back on it, like it's been 2 weeks since that happened and I've been reflecting on it a lot and going, I could have expressed my feelings towards it so differently than I did in the moment. And so when you say that you have to give yourself compassion, absolutely. Because I could sit here and be really hard on myself for acting in a way that I wouldn't normally act.
Right.
Or wouldn't approve of. But I can't get hard on myself about it because it happened. And so what are we going to do from here? We're going to learn the lesson and we're going to move forward with hopefully different tools to handle situations like that when you feel emotionally charged or overwhelmed.
Yeah. And I think that we'll probably get into this too, is like, we're going to probably mention compassion a lot because last week I feel like was just like the theme of compassion. Like I understand self-compassion and things, but like self-compassion for me is almost easier than giving it to others. And I think in this case, like having compassion for others and like where they're at when they do things that feel like are an attack on us is really helpful in helping us like let go of taking things personally.
Okay, another example I can share, because this is about like, you brought up an attack on us.
Yeah.
So Philip and I are planning a wedding, and it's going to be really intimate. Like, it's a very small list of people who are coming, and someone or multiple people actually have been getting upset because they're not at this time allowed to bring a +1 for people that they love, right? So they don't understand like why the people they love are not automatically included in our list of people that are going to make this cut for this wedding. And at first I'm like, hold on. I got super riled up about it because instantly my guard goes up, right? And I'm really defensive over myself and over Philip, and just like, how could you not see this situation for what it is? Like, I went through the whole wide range of emotion, and you really helped me because you were like, well, hold on here. While this behavior is really annoying to deal with, and like it is frustrating because you just expect them to understand that it's not like, this day is not about them and they should be like lucky to have an invite. Everybody is, in a sense, their own main character, or they're operating on that mode. So if that person is getting upset because their person is not on the list, then that's because they're operating from like, they are the most important person in this story. And even though it's your wedding, you're in a supporting role in their big picture. So because you didn't support like their vision, then that's how they're responding to it. And while we know that that's not favorable, you have to accept it for what it is and be like, okay, I don't like this behavior. I don't agree with it. But if I expect them to respond to something the exact same way that I would, that's not always possible, right? Because everybody has different backgrounds and everyone's kind of on their own journey. So not everyone's going to do exactly what you would do. And I found myself saying, I would never do that.
Right.
And that made me even more charged, because the fact in my head that I would never go to that level of like pushing for something and being rude about it, that made me feel like even more defensive. So I think something helpful, if you're finding yourself dealing with someone who's taking things personally, and then now you're taking it personally, you're just kind of in like this cesspool. The worst thing you could do is be like, well, I would never do that.
Right. Well, because, and like Tess was saying, is that we were talking about this is, and not that I'm perfect with this all the time, but when people upset me because they react in a certain way, for example, like I was telling Tess and talking with Phil, is that like, I really do my best, like if my headspace is clear enough to try to understand like where that person is coming from. So if we have like a deeper understanding of like, they are their main character, for example. And so if you don't invite their loved one to your wedding because you have no room, like there are valid reasons, then that loved one of theirs is an extension of themselves. So they're both the main character, and now they both cannot believe that they were not invited to this person's wedding. So having that understanding of like, okay, well, I would probably never act that way, but like other people do. And that in it of itself is okay, even though that situation is upsetting us. So having that understanding, and also like Tess was saying, like not expecting others to react in the same way you do, because honestly 9 times out of 10 when I am upset at someone, it's because I'm expecting them to react how I would, which is like, we live different lives. How could I expect them ever to react like I would? Like honestly, even my best friends, how could I expect them? And then it just brings me back to like, we are all doing the best we can, even though sometimes we can be judgmental and be like, is that the best you're doing? Like, I don't know. Is it? But it is. Like all of us are just coming from our own place in life and trying to do the best that we can. So again, extending that compassion to those people who are hurting us, like helps us in the long run to be like, all right, have this understanding now. Now, how can I react differently to what they're giving me?
So it seems like to not take things personally, it is a perspective shift, right? It's taking the spotlight off of you and why is this happening to you, and why is this person treating you this way or hurting you? And then it's transitioning it to, well, let's try to put ourselves in their shoes. Like what could they possibly be thinking? Like, and not with judgment, like just put yourself in their shoes. They are acting this way because why? And it's not always helpful to come up with those reasons, right? But sometimes, I think majority of the time it is.
Yeah, I do too, because I also think like maybe as humans, like we're just searching for answers. So sometimes like I agree with you. If like someone's not texting you back and you're in like a dating situation and you're building like all these narratives as to why they're not texting you back, maybe that's not great.
Yeah.
But in this scenario, yeah, I think like trying to attach like some sort of meaning to their behavior like lessens the sting of our reaction.
Damn, though, when it happens and you're in like the heat of the moment, or you are taking it personally or they are taking it personally, it is, I think, the most slippery slope, because it can ruin relationships if you're not careful.
Yeah, because I think it's like you instantly like, since we are like describing it as an attack, it's like fight or flight. I'm like, all right, now I'm gonna go to war and defend my loved ones. Like if you're gonna act this way, all right. Yeah, so I think then it's like that, instead of being like reactive, we know to like slow down and be like, all right, like let's step back from this for a second. Like we don't need to give them an answer right this second, most likely. So like let's take a break, like talk it out and come back with some response, which I think that you guys like did so beautifully. So you're preaching like what you do.
Yeah, but I will say, like, okay, so if we can talk about having a little bit of separation between like the event and when you respond, I think that that's helpful, right? But then if you go too long, it's like, why did you sit on that for so long? You know, like I think that there's a period where you need to process your thoughts, but then once your thoughts are processed, if you are going to bring it up to these people or this person, then like you have to execute it within a certain time. Because if it's like something really small and you bring it up like 3 weeks later, you're like, what, you're still thinking about that? What is wrong?
Yeah.
Like, how could you possibly still be thinking about that when our bond is so much deeper? Or, you know, if it's a bigger situation and you bring it up a year later, you're like, okay, like, why has so much time passed? Like, I wish I would have known sooner.
Yeah. No, I understand that. But then sometimes like people just don't have like that ability to maybe say it within like a 3-week time period, you know? Like maybe they like, it took them a long time to like learn the lesson they needed to learn. And that was a year or whatever. And they're like, you know what, this is still bugging me and I value our friendship. So I need to talk this out.
Fair enough. Yeah. Okay. That's a helpful way of seeing it too. Cause if someone were to bring something up to me like a long time after, I'd be like, what?
Yeah.
I wish I had known.
Yeah.
Because
I mean, then I think it is the perspective shift of like, well, okay, then they do value my friendship enough and that's bugging them. Like I'd rather them bring it up to me 10 years later than like never at all, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Another thing that I was writing down here, cause like we're trying to do better about taking like real notes before we come podcast.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit more structured, but this main character thing like really did help me, because as much as I'd like to think that we are not selfish beings, like all of us, and we all can do better than that, a lot of time that is our default. And we don't even catch ourselves operating in that way until it's called out. And so I'd like to think that I'm someone who puts a lot of people's feelings first, and I really try to honor that. But there has been times where that has shot myself in the foot. So I understand why people do what they do. It's just being able to accept it is like the biggest pill for me personally to swallow.
Right.
Because I'm like, I just don't like it. I don't agree with it. But then when you start going in that headspace, it's over.
Yeah, it's so true. Then it's like, I don't want to surround myself with those people, which is like, that's valid, you know? Like those thoughts you have are valid. But
like I'm willing to write people off if they act like this.
Totally,
you know?
totally.
But then I put myself in, you know, the position of, well, I'm someone who recently took something very personally and I reacted in a way that was like almost knee jerk, right? Like it was like, honestly, guys, a tidal wave of emotion. I was like, what? Okay. And so I try to hold space and compassion for people who are having those more knee jerk reactions, because I personally have had them. And when you get out of that like heightened space and you can see things clearly and you've been able to reflect or process, I hope that someone that I've had something like that with has been able to hold space for me and be like, I don't know what that was, but that's okay.
yeah. Well, then I was thinking about like cutting people off in general, and if they cause like this feeling of like you being attacked, or you're like, I just don't want to be friends with them anymore. That's okay, I think, because sometimes I think these things happen so that we can learn that lesson of like, maybe that person's just not meant to be in my life. But I would also add that if the foundation of those people is still strong and like you hold the same values and you're like, yeah, I can see this being a forever friendship, then of course you would keep it. And I think like in the scenario you're talking about where you had that knee-jerk reaction, that was the case.
Oh, yeah.
But maybe not so in others.
Yeah, because, okay, totally. In like, in the one that I'm not like totally diving into, it's because it's like one of my very best friends. And I was just like missing that person so much. And things happen where I was like, why am I not being prioritized is essentially it, right?
Yeah.
I was taking it personally.
Right.
If I can like really extract what was going on in my brain or like what's the root of the issue, it's because I wasn't the priority. And then that made me feel really sad.
Right. And then if we could tie this back to the main character thing, is like in that moment, you were the main character in your life. So you're like, I can't believe that this person doesn't want to spend time with me. Like, I would never do that. But so it's like, yeah. So then again, it's like that perspective shift of like, okay, we're all our main characters. Like, how do we fit in each other's lives? Like, how can I understand this person and try to bring awareness as to like what they're doing?
So I think it's helpful if you can like digest it, if you will, before you have a conversation. But I think that the conversation doesn't always need to happen. But for me, it does.
Yeah.
I'm someone who likes to try to resolve things. Like, we were laughing about this yesterday or the day before, where Madison will be like, gone with the wind. Like, I don't even think about you anymore. I've so moved on. I've released it. It's done. And I, in contrast to that, have been like, I'm going to call you and we're going to talk about this. I'm going to call you out of the blue. You're going to answer it and be like, hello?
Tess is like, well, I've been thinking about this. Like, we need to discuss this. You're like, oh my God, it's Tuesday at 1 p.m., but let's talk this out. Yeah, sure.
There's something in my brain. You mentioned it earlier of like, I think we just all kind of seek answers. Mm-hmm. And for whatever my reasons are, I'm not able to truly rest and feel at peace unless I have been able to hear the other person out and like put the lid on it and be done, file it away.
Yeah. And I do like we were saying, like, I like that about you. Like, there's a lot of value in that.
Maybe part of the reason is like, I will continue to think about it.
Right.
And I will, as you said, like come up with reasons that are maybe not always beneficial for me to think about of like, well, why did this person do this? Like, how about I just call you and ask you? And then that way I don't have to, it takes up too much real estate in my brain, honestly.
Yes. Yeah, I understand that.
So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go crazy if I don't just ask you what's going on. Mm-hmm. So let me just poach that conversation, which is not fun, I'll say. Mm-hmm. But when you do it, necessary. It gets like less scary every time because you're like, oh God. And then they answer the phone and then you're fine.
Yeah, that's true.
Let me think here. What else did I not touch on? Putting yourself in their shoes. Oh, something that I think is helpful, like if you are taking it personally, or if someone's taking it personally, to ask yourself the question, like, what else could it be? Right? So if you're thinking, God, like, okay, let's bring it back to like my best friend example. If I was not being prioritized in terms of like spending time together, why not? What else could it have been that had held that person back from extending the invite or from like making time? And so when I like wasn't able to come up with those answers,
like
myself,
why not for them? Like why?
Yeah, like why didn't they?
Oh, okay.
Right. So I wasn't really able to come up with like a clear solution. I needed to hear it from that person directly for me to be like, oh, okay, all right, cool, I get it now. Because in the moment I was like, my judgment was way too clouded.
Yes.
The emotion was too high. But for like the wedding invite thing, as you mentioned, what else could it be? Like that person just wants to feel like a priority and they want their person to come with and they want to have a good time and they want their person to feel like they're a part of their life.
Right.
So with that being said, so sorry that we don't have room right now. I understand where you're coming from. That still doesn't make a seat at the table happen.
Yeah. I mean, and it's clear as to why, just because you guys are limited with how many guests you can have.
Yeah.
Like that just is why.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, if people don't accept that, then that's on them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been thinking, because this happened like kind of all in the same weekend. This happened like these two events where I was like on a Sunday night going, what's going on here?
Mm-hmm.
Why did everything come to a head in this way at once? Like, why are emotions so charged?
I honestly like, we're going to get back to that point, but I feel like that just happens. Like Tess and I were talking about this the other day of like, this is like parallel to this example of like when sometimes like you can be in high demand. Like for example, myself, all of a sudden there'll just be like a bunch of guys that have a crush on you. And you're like, oh my God, where'd that come from? Out of the blue. And then it's sort of like this example where it's like all of a sudden all these moments are happening where it's like the theme is taking things personally. And I think that that just is what happens. Like, for example, compassion was the theme last week. And like not comparing yourselves is my theme this week. And so like even Kelly, my cousin, we sent audio messages like back and forth and she just starts talking about comparison. And I'm like, isn't that interesting how like you can have a theme in the week or like have something that's building up. And then there's these little things that like add to that bucket of like compassion or comparing yourself or taking things personally. Like, I think that just is the way of things.
Yeah. What do we call that? Synchronicities? Like,
yeah. I mean, potentially, which I think is like really valuable to notice those things because you're noticing them for a reason.
yeah. Well, I was just going to say, like, it really does seem like it's a matter of being tuned in, though, because you could not be thinking about your life in these deeper ways. And then those little messages might graze you, but they might not like actually penetrate and sit with you and make you reflect even deeper.
And that could just be like a thing of like, then you think like, why is this stuff happening to me? Like, why is it all happening for me? And then I like try to flip the script and I'm like, no, it's happening for you.
Yeah. To grow, hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah. Do with it what you can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like that's all I have to cover on this.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. I mean, I don't think you finished your thought though on like last 2 Sundays ago when you were like, why is this all happening to me? Or were you just like stating that as like, why is this
I think
happening?
it was just like without someone helping you reflect on it deeper, it can be really difficult because you feel like your boots are stuck in the mud and you're like, what is all of this all of a sudden?
Yes. And that I would say like even makes you more vulnerable to like, then there's like little attacks you could say and you're just like, I'm going to cry. Like I can't do that anymore. Like there's too much already. And like that thing really sent me over the edge.
Yeah. I mean, that's so true for me, at least, where it's like if I've been experiencing things where I'm starting to notice a pattern and then I'm noticing the pattern even more in the little things and it becomes
like this monster literally that grows. And I'm just like, how am I going to deal with this big thing? And I'm like, no, okay, let's peel it back one thing at a time.
Yeah. But again, I just think addressing it with yourself first and then addressing it with that person if you feel like the means are there, like if it's necessary, like if you value the friendship and you want to like obviously foster that, then you have to say. But sometimes, okay, I'm thinking back to when I got ghosted, which it's funny to me that like I still bring this up. It was clearly so traumatizing.
It also is just like a really good, it's like is a good landmark like in our lives. Like, I don't know why. It just like is such a good example because it touches on so many things.
Yeah.
Like it connects a lot of things in our lives.
It does
like
connect.
Even right now, whatever you're about to say, like it has a connection. So it was clearly like pivotal.
Yeah. But when I got ghosted, I really surprised myself. And if you're new here, I called the guy that ghosted me, which most people are like, no, you didn't. And I'm like, no, I seriously needed to because it was a lot of like mixed signals that was happening. Like, let's hang out when I'm back from my trip. And then it was like no communication, but like all heart on your Instagram stories. Like, you know what I'm talking about. You've been there.
Literally fucking book shit. Like that is
Textbook,
by
yeah.
the book. Yes.
Oh, it's making me like cry of laughter. So I was like, I actually came down to San Diego that weekend that like, or maybe like the weekend after I got ghosted or something. And I was telling Philip about this guy and when I left Philip's house, I was driving home, like, which was like a two and
And
a half.
Philip is her now fiance also,
Yes.
if you're new.
Okay. I was doing a 2.5 hour drive home, and I was just thinking, like, this is actually driving me nuts. Like, not that I need this person to like want me or, you know, want to pursue me, but I just don't understand the behavior. So I want to like figure this out. So that night when I got home, I called.
Okay, I actually like don't remember that.
Yeah, that was the day I called because I was just like, I just spent like the weekend with someone who's really open and just like Philip was just so easy to
So
talk
chill
to.
about it, and you're just
Yeah.
like, yeah, fuck it, let me just call. This is casual.
Yeah, like I think
get
being
that.
with Philip gave me the confidence to be like, what am I afraid of? Like, why don't I just get my answer then? But I just feel like even sometimes when the situation doesn't feel warranted to get an answer, sometimes it's fun. Like, go get your answer.
Yeah, I agree. I also think like we were talking about this is like I just want to like see how that person reacts. Like I want to feel them like squirm a little bit. That's probably sounds
That's
really fucked up,
no.
but I want to see that.
That's what I'm
like,
saying.
how
It's
are they
fun.
going to react on pressure? Yeah, exactly. Like I know how I'm going to react. Let's see.
Yeah, and to be honest, guys, like it wasn't that the answer was this pot of gold where I was like, oh, this makes so much sense. In fact, the
This
answer
is the closure I needed.
No, it was not closure at all.
No.
But it was closure in the sense that I recognize that how this person responds to situations is not what I'm looking for.
Right.
And so that was the answer I needed. But maybe if I had not talked to that person about it and like kind of called out the situation in a nice way, I would have like, you know, had some feelings about it. Mm-hmm. And then because I've seen this person now multiple times in public, maybe that would have been awkward, but now it's not really that awkward because I'm like, what's up? Like we've talked about it. Like we're good.
Yeah, that's true.
So I think that maybe it's helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it just like closes that loose end. Like it really ties it off and it clears space in your brain. Because like for you, relationships are like a very big part of your life. So it's understandable that you would have to hold a lot of space for that, you know?
Yeah. And then I will say that there are times when it is not necessary. Like I think back, like the most viable thing that like, or memory that I have to prove this example is like my mom's, I don't even know what to call him. It was her husband, but he's now since passed. And there was so much that he would do that was hurtful that I would take personally. And I like learned from trial and error that it actually wasn't worth expressing that to him because it never solved anything, and it only made me more frustrated that I wasn't being received and respected because there was no changes that were being made. So I think like with the grain of salt, right? You always have to figure out the situation. It doesn't hurt to try it the first time, but if you keep trying and the person doesn't improve, then you should probably throw in the towel.
Yeah. I think like that's like when we were talking about earlier, how sometimes I just think like gone with the wind, you know, like I'm like, I just let that go. And that person, I have my answer. Like their actions are my answer. Like that's closure. That's more so my pattern is like, well, I don't think that's really necessary to talk about. But then sometimes like that bites me in the ass. So like I will say that yes, there is like a balance that needs to be found there. Just like go with your judgment and see what path is best.
Yeah, because sometimes there could be like really great opportunity there if you had just poached it a little bit.
True. Yeah, like I think that there's like a lot of growth that can happen in both regards. Like staying quiet and figuring it out or approaching a conversation. So it just depends.
Yeah. Do you feel good?
Yeah.
Is that all you have to contribute?
I mean, I think on my note card, I probably have like a whole other episode. So we could probably just save it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for showing up today. And
you too.
For helping me get through things that feel personal and that are oftentimes not personal. So I appreciate you doing that for me. You help illuminate the path.
Hell yeah. Same to you.
Being greater.
No.
Well, growing up, being more mature about situations, you know?
Yeah.
Like deep down, I know that there is that version of me that is mature and can walk through these scenarios with grace. And then on the other hand, you know, there's the Tess who like wants to rear up and go,
Yeah. And you're both of
Defense.
those. Like,
Right.
like you're all things, you know? And I think that that is like what is beautiful about humans anyway, is that we have like all of those contrasts.
Well said.
Thank
Alrighty.
you.
Well, guys, thanks for tuning in. It was like a short and sweet little episode, right? 30 minutes. Cute.
Yeah, that's good.
Bite size
It actually felt like nice to have like one concrete.
topic.
Yeah, because typically we have like a lot, which I like that we have a lot too. Like both are good, but it's just like nice to be like, all right, this is it. And we've come to the conclusion. Time to sign off, you know? Yeah. So thanks for listening.
Yeah. Have a great week, guys. Bye.
Yeah. Bye. Talk soon.
Talk soon.
God, how can
Sorry.
I not say the catch line? Talk soon.
A lot of people, wait, pause. A lot of people do say that to us now.
Yes.
Like when they're like, all right, talk
Like
soon.
they hang up on the phone. They're like, talk soon. I'm like, oh,
Well,
I got
there
that
it
from
is.
you. Yeah. I'm like, cute.
Okay, bye. Talk soon.
Yeah. Talk soon. Too many times I said it.